Imagine this. You wake up in the middle of the night, your heart pounding, your skin clammy. The room is dark, but not the comforting kind of dark, the kind that feels alive, like it's watching you. You try to shake off the unease, but it clings to you like a second skin. You tell yourself it's just a dream, just your mind playing tricks. But deep down, you know better. This isn't about the darkness outside. It's about the darkness within. What if everything you've been running from, your fears, your regrets, your hidden desires, isn't just a shadow trailing behind you? What if it's the very thing you need to confront to truly live? Here's the unsettling truth. We spend our lives chasing light, happiness, success, love, while treating our inner darkness as an enemy. We bury it, deny it, or numb it with distractions. But what if the darkness isn't the enemy? What if it's the key to unlocking the life you've always wanted? Consider this paradox. The more you try to escape your darkness, the more it controls you. It whispers in your doubts, fuels your insecurities, and shapes your decisions without you even realizing it. You think you're running toward the light, but you're just running in circles, tethered to the very thing you refuse to face. Why do we fear the darkness so much? Is it because we've been taught that it's dangerous, shameful, or wrong? Or is it because we sense on some primal level that confronting it will demand something of us? Something we're not sure we're ready to give? Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, called this hidden part of ourselves the shadow. It's the repository of everything we reject, suppress, or disown. Our anger, our jealousy, our selfishness, our pain. But Jung didn't see the shadow as something to be eradicated. He saw it as a source of immense power. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he warned, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think about that for a moment. How much of your life is being directed by forces you don't fully understand? How many of your choices are driven by fears you've never confronted, wounds you've never healed, or desires you've never acknowledged? Now, here's the great question. What would happen if you stopped running? What if, instead of fearing your darkness, you turned to face it, not with judgment or shame, but with curiosity and courage? What if the very thing you've been avoiding is the gateway to your freedom? This isn't just a philosophical musing, it's a call to action. Because the truth is, you can't outrun your shadow. It will always find you in your relationships, your career, your health, your dreams. The only way out is through. But here's the catch. Facing your darkness isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong journey. It's not about fixing yourself or becoming perfect. It's about embracing the full spectrum of who you are, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the broken. So, are you ready to take the first step? Are you ready to stop running and start confronting? Because the journey ahead isn't easy. It will demand everything of you. Your courage, your honesty, your vulnerability. But it will also give you something in return. The chance to live a life that's truly your own. This is where the real work begins. This is where you stop being a prisoner of your past and start becoming the architect of your future. But before we dive into the how, we need to understand the why. Why does this darkness exist in the first place? And why does it hold such power over us? The answers lie in the hidden forces that shape our minds, our hearts, and our lives. And they're far more complex and far more fascinating than you might expect. Let's begin. To understand why we fear our darkness, we must first understand where it comes from. It's not something we're born with, like the color of our eyes or the shape of our hands. It's something we acquire piece by piece as we navigate the world. It's the sum of all the parts of ourselves we've been told are unacceptable, unlovable, or unworthy. Think back to your earliest memories. Do you remember the first time you were scolded for crying? The first time you were told to be nice? When you felt angry? The first time you hid a part of yourself because you feared rejection? These moments, small as they may seem, are the seeds of your shadow. They teach you that certain emotions, desires, or traits are dangerous, not because they are inherently bad, but because they disrupt the social order. Society, in its infinite wisdom, has a vested interest in keeping us in line. It rewards conformity and punishes deviation. From a young age, we learn to split ourselves in two. The acceptable self we show to the world, and the unacceptable self we bury deep within. This is the birth of the shadow. But here's the twist. The shadow doesn't disappear just because we ignore it. It grows stronger, feeding on our denial. It becomes a reservoir of untapped energy, a source of power we could use to transform our lives, if only we knew how to access it. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He saw the shadow as a necessary counterpart to the persona, the mask we wear to navigate the world. The persona is what we want others to see. The shadow is what we don't want them or ourselves to see. But Jung believed that integrating the shadow was essential for psychological wholeness. Everyone carries a shadow, he wrote, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. This is why so many of us feel fragmented, as though we're living two separate lives. On the surface, we're successful, confident, and put together. But beneath the surface, we're haunted by doubts, fears, and desires we can't quite name. We tell ourselves we're fine, but deep down, we know something is missing. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who dared to stare into the abyss, understood this fragmentation on a profound level. He saw modern humanity as a collection of last men, comfortable, complacent, and utterly disconnected from their true selves. Man is the sick animal, he declared, the most courageous animal and the one most in need of danger. What Nietzsche meant is that we've become too comfortable in our avoidance. We've traded authenticity for security, depth for convenience. We've forgotten how to face our darkness, and in doing so, we've forgotten how to truly live. But why is it so hard to confront our shadow? Why do we cling to our masks even when they no longer serve us? The answer lies in the nature of fear itself. Fear isn't just an emotion, it's a survival mechanism. It's what keeps us from touching a hot stove or jumping off a cliff. But when it comes to our inner world, fear often does more harm than good. We fear our darkness because we've been taught to see it as a threat. We fear it will overwhelm us, destroy us, or reveal us as frauds. But what if the opposite is true? What if the darkness isn't a threat, but a teacher? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, believed that suffering was the great teacher of humanity. Life is a business that does not cover the costs, he wrote, and we must learn to endure the pain of existence. While his words may seem bleak, they contain a profound truth. It is through suffering that we grow. It is through confronting our darkness that we find our light. This is the hidden problem. We've been taught to see our darkness as something to be avoided, when in reality, it's something to be embraced. It's not a flaw or a failure. It's a part of who we are. And until we learn to integrate it, we'll remain trapped in a cycle of fear and avoidance. But here's the good news. The shadow isn't a prison. It's a portal. It's the gateway to self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-transformation. It's the key to unlocking the life you've always wanted, if you're willing to face it. So, what's stopping you? Is it fear, shame, the belief that you're not strong enough? Whatever it is, know this: you are not alone. Every human being carries a shadow. Every human being struggles with the same fears, the same doubts, the same desires. But not every human being chooses to confront them. This is where the real work begins. This is where you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming the hero of your own story. But before you can do that, you need to understand the consequences of ignoring your shadow. Because the truth is, the shadow doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone around you. It shapes your relationships, your career, your health, your dreams. And if you don't confront it, it will. continue to control you, silently and visibly, relentlessly. The question is, are you ready to see it? Imagine a man who spends his life chasing success. He climbs the corporate ladder, buys the house, drives the car, and collects the accolades. On the surface, he has it all. But beneath the surface, he's drowning. He's plagued by a gnawing emptiness, a sense that no matter how much he achieves, it will never be enough. He doesn't understand why he feels this way. He doesn't realize that his relentless pursuit of success is just a distraction, a way to avoid the darkness within. This is the unseen consequence of ignoring your shadow. It doesn't just stay hidden. It seeps into every aspect of your life, shaping your choices, your relationships, and your sense of self. It's the reason you feel stuck, no matter how much you achieve. It's the reason you keep repeating the same mistakes, no matter how hard you try to change. Let's break this down. When you suppress your shadow, you're not just burying your fears or your flaws, you're burying a part of yourself. And that part doesn't just disappear, it goes underground, where it grows. Stronger and more insidious, it becomes a hidden force, influencing your behavior in ways you don't even realize. For example, take anger. Most of us have been taught that anger is bad. We're told to calm down, be nice, or let it go. But what happens when you suppress your anger? It doesn't vanish. It festers. It turns into resentment, bitterness, or passive aggressiveness. It leaks out in subtle ways, through sarcasm, criticism, or withdrawal. And over time, it poisons your relationships, your health, and your sense of self. This is the paradox of the shadow. The more you try to suppress it, the more control it has over you. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can push it down for a while, but eventually it will burst to the surface, often with explosive consequences. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, understood this dynamic well. He believed that human beings are condemned to be free, that we have no choice but to make choices. But he also recognized that most of us spend our lives trying to escape this freedom. We cling to roles, routines, and beliefs that give us a sense of security, even as they limit our potential. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself, Sartre wrote. But what happens when we refuse to face the parts of ourselves that don't fit into the roles we've chosen? What happens when we deny our anger, our fear, our desire? We become trapped in what Sartre called bad faith, a state of self-deception where we live inauthentically, denying our true nature in order to fit in. This is the unseen consequence of ignoring your shadow. It keeps you trapped in bad faith. It keeps you living a life that's not truly your own. But the consequences don't stop there. When you suppress your shadow, you also rob yourself of its power. The shadow isn't just a repository of negative traits, it's also a source of creativity, passion, and vitality. It's the part of you that feels deeply, desires fiercely, and dares greatly. When you cut yourself off from it, you cut yourself off from your own potential. Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, saw this dynamic play out on a societal level. In his dystopian vision of the future, humanity has traded freedom for comfort, depth for distraction, and authenticity for conformity. People are kept docile and content through a combination of pleasure and propaganda, but at the cost of their humanity. Most men and women will grow up to love their servitude, Huxley warned. But what he didn't say, what he didn't need to say, is that this servitude begins within. It begins when we refuse to face our darkness, when we choose comfort over courage, and when we trade our authenticity for approval. This is the unseen consequence of ignoring your shadow. It keeps you trapped in a kind of psychological servitude. It keeps you living a life that's small, safe, and ultimately unsatisfying. But here's the thing, you don't have to stay trapped. You don't have to keep living in bad faith. You don't have to keep suppressing your shadow. The first step is to see it, to recognize the ways it's shaping your life, to understand that the emptiness you feel the mistakes you keep making, the relationships that keep failing. They're not random. They're not just bad luck. They're the result of a hidden force, a force you've been ignoring for far too long. The second step is to confront it, to stop running and start facing, to stop suppressing and start integrating. This isn't easy. It's messy, uncomfortable, and often painful, but it's also necessary, because the only way out is through. So, are you ready to take the next step? Are you ready to stop being a victim of your shadow and start becoming its master? Because the journey ahead isn't just about facing your darkness, it's about reclaiming your light. Imagine standing at the edge of a dense forest. The trees are tall and ancient, their branches intertwined to form a canopy so thick that barely any light filters through. You know that somewhere in the heart of this forest lies a treasure, a part of yourself you've lost, a truth you've been avoiding, a power you've forgotten. But to reach it, you must venture into the darkness. This is the essence of rebellion, the willingness to step into the unknown, to face what terrifies you, and to reclaim what has been lost. It's not a rebellion against others, but against the parts of yourself that have kept you small, safe, and stagnant. It's a rebellion against the shadow, not to destroy it, but to integrate it. So, how do you begin? The first step is to stop running. This sounds simple, but it's anything but. Running from your shadow is a habit, and habits are hard to break. You've spent years, maybe decades, distracting yourself, numbing yourself, and convincing yourself that everything is fine. But deep down, you know it's not. The second step is to turn toward your darkness with curiosity, not judgment. This is where most people get stuck. We've been taught to see our shadow as something shameful, something to be fixed or eradicated. But what if it's not? What if it's simply a part of you, a part that's been misunderstood, neglected, or rejected? Carl Jung believed that the shadow contains not only our darkest impulses, but also our greatest potential. The shadow is a living part of the personality, he wrote, and therefore wants to live with it in some form. The goal isn't to eliminate the shadow, but to integrate it, to bring it into the light of consciousness, where it can be understood and transformed. This process begins with self-awareness. You must learn to recognize the ways your shadow manifests in your life. Do you lash out when you feel vulnerable? Do you sabotage yourself when you're close to success? Do you cling to relationships that no longer serve you? These are all signs that your shadow is at work. Once you've identified these patterns, the next step is to explore them. This requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. It means asking yourself difficult questions. Why do I feel this way? What am I afraid of? What am I trying to protect? This is where journaling can be a powerful tool. Writing allows you to externalize your thoughts and feelings, making them easier to examine. It also creates a record of your journey, so you can track your progress over time, but self-awareness is only the beginning. To truly integrate your shadow, you must also take action. This means making conscious choices that align with your true self, rather than your fears or insecurities. It means setting boundaries, taking risks, and embracing vulnerability. Friedrich Nietzsche understood the transformative power of action. Become who you are, he urged. But becoming who you are requires more than self-reflection. It requires self-expression. It means stepping into your power, even when it feels uncomfortable or unfamiliar. This is where many people falter. They get stuck in the why of their shadow, why they feel this way, why they act this way, without ever moving on to the how. How can I change? How can I grow? How can I become the person I want to be? The answer lies in small, consistent steps. You don't have to overhaul your life overnight. In fact, trying to do so will likely backfire. Instead, focus on making one small change at a time. Maybe it's speaking up when you'd normally stay silent. Maybe it's saying no when you'd normally say yes. Maybe it's taking a risk when you'd normally play it safe. Over time, these small steps will add up. They will help you build confidence, resilience, and a deeper connection to yourself. They will also help you reclaim the energy you've been wasting on avoidance and suppression. But perhaps the most important step in this process is to seek support. You don't have to do this alone. In fact, trying to do so can make the journey much harder. Whether it's through therapy, coaching, or simply talking to a trusted friend, having someone to guide you, challenge you, and hold you accountable can make all the difference. This is the essence of rebellion, the willingness to face your darkness, not as an enemy, but as an ally. It's the willingness to embrace your full self, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the broken. But this is just the beginning, because once you've faced your shadow, once you've integrated it, you'll discover something even more profound, the ultimate truth about who you are and what you're capable of. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around you, the ground far below. For years, you've been afraid of this moment, afraid of falling, afraid of failing, afraid of what lies beyond. But now, as you stand here, something shifts. You realize that the fear hasn't disappeared, but it no longer controls you. You realize that the edge isn't a threat, it's an invitation. This is the ultimate truth. The darkness you've been running from isn't something to be feared. It's something to be embraced. It's not a prison, it's a portal. It's the gateway to your true self, the self that's been waiting patiently for you to stop running and start living. But this realization doesn't come easily. It requires a radical shift in perspective, a willingness to see your shadow not as a flaw, but as a teacher. It requires you to understand that the darkness isn't the opposite of light. It's the other side of the same coin. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. It's not about achieving perfection or eliminating your flaws. It's about embracing the full spectrum of who you are, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the broken. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, Jung wrote, but by integration of the contraries. This is the ultimate truth. You are not meant to be perfect. You are meant to be whole. But what does this mean in practical terms? It means that your anger, your fear, your jealousy, your pain, they're not obstacles to your growth. They're opportunities. They're invitations to dive deeper, to understand yourself more fully, and to reclaim the parts of yourself you've disowned. It also means that your shadow isn't something to be fixed or eradicated. It's something to be integrated. It's a source of power, creativity, and vitality. It's the part of you that feels deeply, desires fiercely, and dares greatly. This is the ultimate truth. Your darkness is not your enemy, it's your ally. But here's the catch. Embracing your shadow doesn't mean indulging it. It doesn't mean giving free rein to your anger, your fear, or your selfishness. It means acknowledging these feelings, understanding their roots, and channeling their energy in constructive ways. For example, anger can be destructive, but it can also be a powerful motivator for change. Fear can be paralyzing, but it can also be a signal that you're stepping outside your comfort zone. Pain can be debilitating, but it can also be a catalyst for growth. The key is to stop seeing these emotions as problems to be solved and start seeing them as opportunities to be explored. This is the ultimate truth. Your emotions are not your enemies. They're your guides. But perhaps the most profound realization of all is this: the journey toward wholeness is never ending. There is no final destination, no point at which you'll have arrived. The shadow is not a problem to be solved. It's a process to be embraced. This is the ultimate truth. Life is not about escaping your darkness. It's about learning to dance with it. So what does this mean for you? It means that every challenge, every setback, every moment of discomfort is an opportunity to grow. It means that the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject are the very parts that can set you free. It means that the courage to face your own darkness is not just a choice, it's a calling. And now, as you stand on the edge of this new understanding, you have a choice to make. Will you step back into the safety of the known, or will you take the leap into the unknown, trusting that the darkness will catch you? The choice is yours, but know this. Whatever you choose, the darkness will always be there, waiting, watching, whispering. The question is, will you listen?